Along with just about every other media outlet in the country, LBC had reporters up and down the country yesterday, and I doubt that the managers will be pleased to hear me say this, but I'm delighted to say they had very little to report, because it was the ultimate counter-protest, wasn't it? Now, before we give you coverage of that and get into analysis and ask, have the police now won back the streets? And also, I think we must celebrate the work of the judiciary. My God, they're pushing those people through the courts at a rate of knots. And some tasty sentences as well. 3 years for one of those thugs. 7 years in total for 3 of them. Fantastic. But here's a question. Over the last 7 or 8 days, if you happen to be Asian, black, mixed race, Muslim, you've probably at times felt concerned. I've taken calls from you. I'm worried about my wife and daughter going out to see their friends. I'm worried about my wife, she wears a head covering. I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. Hopefully you've now seen the true face of Great Britain, or certainly England anyway. You've seen the true face. So if you are, and I can't answer this obviously, because if you've ever had the misfortune of seeing me on television, you'll know that I'm a white bloke. So I have no idea. I haven't felt personally threatened by these, because I say again, I don't live in any of those areas actually where it's gone on. I don't live in Bristol or Rotherham or any other places, Plymouth, and my part of town has been fairly quiet. But I don't know. More importantly, it's a call to you now, if you are black, mixed race, Asian, Muslim, whatever. Or indeed, actually, hold on a cotton-picking minute. If you also work in the field of immigration law, if you're a lawyer or support staff, do you now feel safe? Or indeed, if you're an emergency worker, because let's not forget, attacks on emergency workers, not just police officers, but paramedics, increased as well in these bizarre 7 or 8 days we've endured. But to the tale of last night. Now, prior to, of course, it getting dark, there were warnings from police and government alike for far-right thugs to stay at home. This was the message from Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, who yesterday went to the hotel in Rotherham, which was the scene of that horrific violence last weekend.
The police will be there to respond to any violent and criminality that we see on our streets. There's no place for that on our UK streets, and the police will do their job, like they have done, exceptionally well.
Now, I mentioned those heavy sentences. Let's look at perhaps the events. The quietness was a reflection of the sentences that were handed down to those who were involved in the early stages of last week's violence. One man who'd rioted in Southport last Tuesday night was given 3 years for punching a police officer. And yesterday afternoon, the Director of Public Prosecution, Stephen Parkinson, told reporters he wants the justice system to come down hard on all those who've broken the law.
I am looking to charge the most serious offences that reflect the criminality that has occurred. I want to do that in order to give the judges maximum capability to pass sentences which are deserved by the conduct that we have seen.
And to last night, a night when it felt as if the nation waited on tenterhook for scenes of anger and lawlessness, which mercifully never materialised. Journalists from media organisations fanned out across the country with microphones and cameras as thousands of anti-racism protesters and campaigners flooded the streets, vastly outnumbering those who did turn up from the far right. One of the few places where far-right protesters were on view was Blackpool, and LBC's Lewis Goodall was there, and he's told our LBC colleague Henry Riley about the atmosphere in the town centre.
It was nervy, and there was a little bit more sort of action, quote unquote, than there was in other parts of the country. You know, there were a couple of arrests made by the riot police. There was some shouting at the police at different sort of times. It felt like it was just about to combust, but it never quite ignited. It never sort of quite got there. And I think maybe it was a combination of the numbers weren't quite big enough, but there was, I don't know, a sort of slight sense by the end of it, almost like it slightly sort of petered out. There was a sort of ennui, a kind of sense of sort of tiredness, sort of fatigue and weariness with it. And it all just ended up a bit of a sort of damp squib, really.
Ennui on Blackpool from Lewis Goodall there. Now, within the last few minutes, Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley, has said this.
We put thousands of officers on the street, and I think the show of force from the police and, frankly, the show of unity from communities together defeated the challenges that we've seen. And it went off very peacefully last night.
You'll hear from a former senior officer at Scotland Yard in just a moment, Andy Trotter. But first to Shami Chakrabarti, who of course was Shadow Attorney General and indeed Director of Liberty, and I say is a personal friend. Good to have you on, Shami. Has the danger passed for Asian folk, those of Muslims as well, and black folk? What do you say? Morning.
Good morning. I don't think we can say the danger's past, but we do feel relieved and heartened this morning, don't we? We saw
You'll
Britain
know
at
better
its
than I, Shami,
best.
for obvious reasons.
Well, we saw people at their best last night. We saw the police. We've seen the police at their best for some time. To be clear, putting themselves in harm's way to protect vulnerable communities, and they mostly were Muslim and black and brown communities, and of course asylum seekers, some of the most vulnerable people in the country. So the police have done a great job, but it was also heartening to see all of those thousands of people up and down the country, totally peaceful. And by the way, Nick, I was listening to Ian Payne's show earlier, and I know that some callers said, well, this is two-tier justice because the police didn't crack down yesterday on the anti-racist protesters, and because certain cases are being accelerated through the court system. That is not two-tier justice. The police respond to what they face. If people are assembling in a peaceful manner, the police are not going to be in conflict with them. The police keep the peace in our country. And as for accelerating cases, when you have riots, when you have coordinated violence around the country, it is perfectly sensible to accelerate those cases to protect the rule of law in our land.
Earlier in the week, we looked at the Brixton riots and the Scarman inquiry that followed that, and quite a lot of good that it achieved. Any inquiry that is put together into the events we've witnessed over the last 8 days, what does it need to explore, Shami?
I think after the fires go out, and I hope that they are nearly out. It's not for me. The police will know more about the intelligence. But after the immediate crisis, you do, as with Scarman, need to look deeper. You need to look into the root causes of people's alienation.
Absolutely.
Is it poverty, inequality, a feeling of not being heard, a feeling that they don't have access to opportunity, to public services, and that some people with their rhetoric have been demonising the other and passing the buck from political responsibility to vulnerable, destitute people. Asylum seekers do not have access to council housing, for example. They are not allowed to work. So this idea that they've been stealing opportunities, this tiny percentage of people who come to this country who are asylum seekers, I think there's political leadership that's required too. And it's not... I'm so glad, by the way, that Robert Jenrick has rowed back on his foolish remarks about...
Just remind us, this is the ludicrous idea you can't say Allah Akbar on the streets.
Well, you might as well. I mean, every context is everything, and no doubt, even religious phrases could be used in an angry way. But you have to look at context, and it's almost like saying "onward, Christian soldiers" is inevitably a battle cry.
Hang on, that was sung at my last wedding. We can't let that one go. Shami, I must leave you there. You know why? For time reasons, because you've done this yourself. Labour peer Shami Chakrabarti, former Shadow Attorney General. Thanks, Shami. 14 after 7. Straight to Andy Trotter, who was Chief Constable of the BTP, British Transport Police, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Public Order at the Met, and joins me now. OK, have the boys and girls in blue got the streets back, Andy? Morning.
Certainly, I mean, huge congratulations to the police officers up and down the country for the work they've done over the last few days. I think big congratulations to the criminal justice system, for working much quicker than usual. Good sentences, and I think that played a big part in subduing the problems. But I think the biggest has got to go to the counter demonstrators last night. I thought it was really quite moving to see Britain coming together across the country to demonstrate support for their fellow citizens. So all of those things, I think, worked brilliantly last night to stop the anticipated problems. But, we've got a hot weekend coming up.
Well, this is it. You used to be Chief Constable of the BTP, the British Transport Police, the men and women who are under your command. They got a busy one with the football season kicking off, haven't they?
They have. We've got the so-called friendlies in some places. We've got the championship starting as well. I say that because some of them used to get quite lively. But we've got a whole range of other things. We've got an exhausted workforce who've been at it now for day after day after day, who want a break. But, this isn't over yet, and they, the police leaders know this, that they'll be examining the intelligence. We've got to make sure that this is under control now, and so they'll know they'll be looking very closely at the intelligence, but they won't be jumping to any conclusions about just stopping operations right now. But I think they've clearly now got to look at a whole range of things afterwards, and you touched on reviews, and there'll obviously be a review of a whole range of issues.
Lastly, noting you now chair the London Ambulance Service, I don't know about LAS staff, but I know that in other countries, paramedics have actually been attacked in some of these demos. What's your view on that? A word on that, Andy, before I let you go.
Well, I mean, all NHS staff, and I was at a hospital yesterday visiting colleagues there, all very, most diverse workforce in the country, a wonderful workforce, and people were very, very anxious, and that includes paramedics as well. And we are seeing, not just recently, but over the last months, years, more and more verbal and sometimes physical abuse of staff across the NHS, and not just the NHS, transport workers, shop workers. So there's more to come from this. We can't just have brilliant policing, great criminal justice system at times of crisis. This has got to be something that we look at, that the public want and crave, that we have a robust policing, robust court system, swift justice that goes on into the rest of society in the normal and everyday. So huge congratulations to everyone involved. But there's a lot for us to learn from this, I think.